Exodus 15, 22 to 27, which is where we are, St John's in Christchurch this coming Sunday, which will be the 4th of May. We broke off the story just before Easter, a few weeks before Easter, as God's people have been rescued from Egypt, and they're now on their way to the land God had promised Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and so on and so forth, and a covenant that was repeated earlier in Exodus to Moses. And we get here three passages to start us off. Chapter 16 is not necessarily a short passage, but shorter episodes here of God's people and what they do when they've left Egypt, and they grumble. They've just been rescued and they grumble. Let's look at these verses I've pasted on the here from the NIV. This is the NIV version. Let's see. Moses led Israel from the Red Sea. They went into the desert of Shur. For 3 days they travelled in the desert and they didn't find water. You can survive apparently three weeks without food, 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water. So they're desperate, aren't they? And they come to Marah, verse 23. Marah literally means bitter. We'll see that in a second. They could not drink its water because it was bitter. Now, literally, I think literally in the Hebrew it says they were bitter. The people were bitter. I think that's is the question of the it and the they here. But that's why the place is called Marah. Marah means bitterness. And so the water is bitter. And the people are bitter also, I think. The people grumble. This word is a strong word of rejection. It's not just a light background thing. It's a kind of a strong, angry reaction, really. And it's against Moses here, the servant, saying, what are we to drink? So you can understand this. I mean, they find some water at Marah, but they can't drink it. And they're desperate for water after 3 days. They didn't find it for 3 days. Now they find some, they can't drink it. So that's understandable in one sense, but also we've got to see that it's a rejection. It's a rejection of God's provision in their grumbling. What are we to drink? Now we'll get into this a little bit more in the next episode in chapter 16, because this grumbling gets repeated. There's all kinds of stuff going on there. It is a grumbling against God essentially, but we'll save that thunder for next week as we look at chapter 16. But it's against Moses, who is their who's the representative of the Lord. He's the Lord's representative, who has led them out of Egypt and leading them into the desert from the sea. So it says that Moses led. So what are we to drink? And so this is a rejection of God's appointed servant. I've given this a little heading here. The Lord's rescued people can suffer bitterness. And that can be, as I guess, it's the bitterness of the water, but it's bitterness in themselves. They're bitter grumbling. Let's see what happens next. Let's come back to what this means for us, but let's see what happens next. Verse 25, Moses cried out to the Lord. The Lord showed him a piece of wood or a tree. He threw it into the water became fit to drink. The NIV calls it fit to drink. The ESV more literally calls it sweet, which is the opposite of bitter, sweet. Some commentators wonder whether the piece of wood had some properties that changed the flavour of the water, or whether is this a miracle. Doesn't really matter. The point is, Moses, under the Lord's guidance, transforms this water into something that they can now drink. And it says, there the Lord issued a ruling and instruction for them. Now, literally in the Hebrew, it's him, singular, which would suggest Moses, because Moses is the one who's acting in the first half of the verse. So it's likely to be him, and put him to the test. And you see this in verse 26. These yous, we would naturally perhaps tend to read them as plural yous, you all, but it's singular yous actually in the original. He said, if you, I think this is directed to Moses, listen carefully to the Lord your God and do what is right in his eyes. If you pay attention to his commands and keep his decrees. In other words, if you are a faithful, trusting, obedient person, I will not bring on you, Moses, any of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians. Find the Lord who heals you. Or uplifts you, or establishes you. And interesting, it's not healing the water here, it's healing the people, isn't it? Healing a person. In other words, it's healing faith. So if you're a faithful Israelite, Moses, then all will go well. All will go well. And I think this is the provision, isn't it? The provision, the Lord provides, however you read it, the Lord provides sweetly for his bitter people, sweetly through Moses' action. And I think we need to think here about a leader who is going to be faithful. I think that's right. I think we naturally read these as plurals, and that is true. This is still true if it's plural, but I think here in this passage, it's actually getting at the singular person Moses. When I say it's true, the principles are true if we take these as plurals, but I think here in particular it is the individual. And then just as it happens, verse 27, so sorry, what I put here, the Lord provides sweetly for his bitter people. Then let's look at verse 27. Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs, 70 palm trees. These are sort of numbers of significance, aren't they? 12, 70, numbers of sort of perfection, really. And they camped there near the water. So they suddenly have, just around the corner, just the next thing, they go around the corner and they find exactly what they needed. And the Lord provides perfectly for his people. They were grumbling here in verse 24, the water they did find, thinking, oh my goodness, sort of 3 days to find some water and you can't even drink it. Just around the corner with these 12 springs and 70 palm trees for them. Just think of that in our bitter grumbling, the Lord, he knows exactly what's just around our corner and provides perfectly for us. So, I've got the Lord's rescue people can suffer bitterness. It'd be good to dig into that as we think about this passage, ways in which we're bitter, we grumble, we might say we're saved, we're redeemed, we're forgiven people, like the Israelites were, but we still get bitter about life. We grumble about things as if, and really, the Lord will provide. The Lord will be faithful, but we do grumble about this, and just hang there before we get to the solution. To say we're like this. Here, I think getting this across would be along the lines of that actually we do have this provision. And I think the provision for us is Jesus, isn't it? Jesus is the one who's a faithful leader who leads us through, and through Jesus, who carefully obeyed all of the commands of the Lord. He was not bitter, and he is the way we have healing. As he was restored from death, we have that restoration as well. So the Lord provides sweetly for his bitter people through Christ, and then the Lord provides perfectly for his people. Just holding on to that fact that just around the corner, whatever we're struggling with in life, as we walk the journey of faith, we might be just about to approach an Elim, and just trusting that the Lord knows exactly what is around the corner, just to refresh us, to restore us, and to camp. That's where we'll be camped, and maybe this is a picture of a little picture of the promised land in a sort of small scale model version of, if you know what I mean. There isn't the promised land, but it's kind of like a sort of a small little taste of it here in verse 27. Here's the theme. In our bitter grumbling, God provides perfectly by his perfect servant. That's trying to reflect all of these verses. And go from bitter grumbling to trust in Jesus. Jesus' perfectly sweet provision. I think that's ultimately himself. He provides himself at the cross ultimately. But there's all kinds of other things he provides us. His presence, his leading, his comfort. He does provide in sort of on this life's journey oases of respite and encouragement and shelter. Maybe that's what church is on a Sunday. I'm sure that's true. It provides us a shelter from the sort of the desert of the week, the days of the week, the other days of the week at least, as we gather. You can expand that in that way. Some applications here. I've got 3 little bullet points. First of all, in this first part, to acknowledge our bitter grumbling, to see it as a rejection of the goodness of God to us, and even though we've been rescued, we start grumbling about things. To trust in Jesus, who perfectly obeyed, trusted God to provide. We've been provided with Jesus, and we're to trust in him. Interestingly, that this just think I don't want to go overwork this, but this piece of wood literally is the word for tree, and maybe I think is probably perhaps overstating this. This idea of a tree, is it a reference very loosely to the cross? The tree is how we. I don't know. I could be going could be going a bit crazy there. Okay, thirdly, know that Jesus will soon lead us to perfect provision. It's just around the corner. He knows exactly what this journey is like, and just around the corner, if we only kept going, we'll find an oasis. He knows exactly what we need, and will provide what we need on this journey of faith and life. I'm going to pray. Lord Jesus, I thank you that as we look at this story in Exodus, God's rescued people, though we also, like them, can be bitter and grumble about our situations, our circumstances, wider circumstances perhaps, church situations even. Thank you that you do provide for us, and really the real difficulty is not the situation, it's in us. It's the bitterness in us that's the big issue that we need your help with. And you've given us Jesus Christ. Help us to look to him, to rely on his cross, to rely on his resurrection, to trust in that, and to not be bitter, to be healed by you through that cross, through that leading of Jesus. And Lord, help us to know that you do provide for us on this life's journey. You provide for us elims along the way, just what we need. So help us to not grumble against your servant Jesus, not grumble against you, and not be bitter, but to be faithful, obedient, trusting people like your son Jesus was. Amen.